Hello and welcome to Ways to Change Your Workplace. Today am talking with Lorissa Garcia. Lorissa, I've got a little bit of a spiel on you and I'll read out a little bit, but then I want you to talk to what you do because it's very fascinating. So Lorissa specializes as a coach, mentor, and facilitator. Lorissa works across the areas of capability, culture, and people strategy, areas I love, Lorissa. Acting as a translator, connector, and strategist to support growth and build up confidence, Lorissa supports people partners and leaders map their work to the organizational strategy, giving a true line of sight to business goals and purpose to their leadership role. Amazing stuff, Lorissa. And a bit of disclosure, Lorissa loves an almond croissant, as do I, and we have come prepared today with our feast, which we're going to eat afterwards. I have actually attended your one of your sessions, Lorissa, which was on mindful change, and that was amazing. And this is when I was working within the world of HR. I am my own boss now. So Lorissa, I wanted to talk to you about loads of things, but want to focus on recharging for human resources professionals as a topic for our conversation today. Having worked in HR for all of my career, pretty much, I think it's such an important thing for HR professionals to recharge, and people like you are rather rare. You're quite the unicorn, Lorissa. Welcome.
Thank you. So nice to be here. I've never been called a unicorn, so that's quite flattering.
Lorissa, do you want to tell us a bit more about what you do in your own words?
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of summed it up in the intro. I think, coach, mentor, facilitator, they're the three things that I absolutely love doing. And when I went out on my own, as people often do, I went out as a consultant, and I was never really comfortable with that consultant title. And what I found very quickly was that people don't want you to come in and do the piece of work, drop it on them and then walk away. They want to learn and build their own capability sitting next to you while you're doing that. And so I kind of adjusted my model a little bit away from consultancy to more of that coach, mentor kind of role, and then facilitation, where it's required. So yeah, that's where I've kind of landed in my niche, I guess.
Beautiful. And Lorissa, you're based in Melbourne?
I am in Melbourne, sunny Melbourne today. It hasn't been so sunny lately, but yes, Melbourne.
Beautiful. And in terms of work, you serve clients all around the world, I believe.
I do.
Global?
Yeah, global, which is really interesting. I never saw my business as being, or my practice as being a global practice, but it's interesting the types of people that I've attracted. So when I first went out on my own and picked up my very first client, they were a Berlin-based client that I met on a public Slack channel, and I was lucky enough to be engaged with them. They were looking for someone to do some work in the culture space. They had collected a whole heap of qualitative data, but didn't know what to do with that. And so sort of stepped into that arena very quickly with them, and worked with them for about 9 months as a coach and mentor.
Nice.
Yeah, which was amazing. They had mostly distributed workforce. So that was my first kind of entry in that distributed workforce, where they had a head office in Berlin, but, only sort of 15 people worked in that head office. The rest of them were scattered around North America and Europe.
Cool. What a good first gig.
I know, it kind of set me up to have high expectations and high standards of a client. And that client was, particularly great because it allowed me to go in and do that people strategy piece for them as a smaller growing company that was about to be funded. Yeah. And so, yeah, they flew me out to Hong Kong. We met in Hong Kong and did a week of people strategy together. And it was just so nice kind of being embedded in that organization, but being able to see it from a different perspective. And I think that's one of the things that I love bringing to the work that I do, is that different perspective that people often don't see when they're embedded in an organisation so heavily and head down. That ability to kind of lift their heads up and look out on the horizon is, what I love doing.
Absolutely. You've got that external perspective that you can bring to whatever industry that you support.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a really controversial question to kick off with, Lorissa. Why don't HR people spend enough time developing themselves? And I ask this for a number of reasons. You go first and I'll explain my experience in HR.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I can speak to this because I've been a HR person, you know, for a very long time. And I think one of the patterns I've recognized is that HR people don't want to admit vulnerability. They don't want to be seen to be vulnerable. I was raised as an HR person that way, that HR should always know what they're doing, should always know the answers to everything, should always have that professional hat on. And that discourages HR people from actually saying, I don't know. I'm not sure, let me find out, or, you know, I'll go away, or actually, you know what, let's ask the people in the organisation what they want. It was always bringing to the table as opposed to asking for feedback. And so I think that we're the last ones to fit our own oxygen masks. Basically, we're fitting everyone else's at this, you know, particularly in times of pandemics and crises and things like that. So I think that, yeah, it's that ability to be vulnerable is hard to do as an HR person.
Oh, and we preach that. All about vulnerability and, you know, wonderful leadership and self-reflection, all of that. I think HR people are good at self-reflection, but it's just that developmental aspect that's really often lacking. And I think you've hit the nail on the head in that you can't admit, or many HR professionals perceive that they can't admit that they're lacking in whatever capability area. I remember in one of my first ever jobs at British Telecom, my manager then said to me, it's okay not to know, and to tell our clients, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. Let me go and learn and find out, and I'll get back to you. So just that line I have used for the rest of my career. And developmentally, I have always sought to develop myself, which is why I ended up in one of your, you know, various courses, which was excellent. And yeah, I've always taken it on board myself if my organization doesn't provide that for me. Absolutely so. What is one big thing that HR leaders need to focus on for their own development at the moment, given everything that you've just stated in relation to the pandemic, the way HR is really working across the world at the moment?
Yeah. Look, I think I'm slightly biased in some of my answers here because it's the space that I work in. But I think two things I'd sort of say is leadership skills. HR need better leadership skills. They need to be able to know the business really well and speak the language of the business, and be able to kind of embed themselves in their client group or the client group that they're working with, or the organisation that they're servicing, to understand what the drivers are. You know, how does the organisation make money? Who are the competitors? You know, how does the what are the expenses in the organisation? Those kind of big pieces around strategic. What's the strategy to propel the organisation forward? What has changed since the pandemic that might change the organisation's direction? And how do we adjust, you know, the people practices within the organisation to reflect that? So leadership capability is one of the things. The second thing is to take that specialist HR hat off and ask the business what they want. So go in with a human-centered design approach almost, you know, like taking some of those things around collecting information or asking the business what's best for them, what do they want, what do they need, what's going to enable them to work more collaboratively or more productively, and be willing to listen to that and design, you know, for that, not for what we've done in the past or what other organisations are doing. It's what that organisation needs and addressing the context within that organisation to match.
Beautiful. I remember working in one of my HR roles, I completely changed our HR team, and I brought in a human-centered design expert to look at all of our processes and the various touch points, and the pain points as well in, you know, our interactions with all of our customers. And that was, you know, it was so insightful to look at it from a customer perspective rather than the HR perspective, because I know also HR come from a lens of managing risk, managing often, you know, legal things, and protecting the organization's brand as well, which is where they're coming from. So amazingly, wonderfully great intentions.
Yes.
But then a customer can get lost, you know, somewhere down the line, especially if we're focused on the scary stuff that's, you know, very risk averse as well. Yeah.
It's almost, you know, I think you're right. I think, you know, as an HR practitioner, we are all about managing risk. And, you know, the three things that I talk about when I talk about risk is financials, reputation, and people. And if it's touching any one of those, then it's a responsibility of, you know, someone to manage that risk. On the flip side, though, we're sometimes so embedded in managing the compliance and the risk base, you know, for an organisation, we're not looking at the people. We're managing the process instead of the people.
Yep.
which, you know, further isolates us as HR practitioners in terms of, you know, getting closer to our client group and getting closer to the people that, you know, that we're wanting to work with in the organisation.
Yeah, completely. So I've seen, so talking to Australia and human resources in Australia specifically at the moment, most HR teams are now called people and culture teams. You know, so we've got the name, we've rebranded to have that focus on people and culture, but many don't actually practice what their job title or their team's title is.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that or comments on that?
So you might resonate with this. I had a coach a few years ago and she had said to me that all HR practitioners should be called change managers because you are managing massive amounts of change all the time.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that, you know, and particularly we've seen it come to life in a pandemic that HR practitioners are being asked to do things that they've never been asked to do before. And managing, you know, the change process in so many different ways. I think, you know, having a great framework, a solid framework that you can work to and the tools and the skills to be able to manage change. I think whether it's a small process or a demobilisation of, you know, a workforce to their home base, or whether it's a complete culture change, I think those change skills will be, you know, they're going to be what the future needs.
I love that. So HR people are essentially change agents. If we look at ourselves that way, then completely. And the role of HR is constantly evolving, especially given everything that's happened this year.
Yeah.
And given everything that's happened this year, I'm really seeing wonderful things for HR professionals in that, you know, they are really respected. They have a table at the C-suite. They are invited to the boardroom, often more so now as well. How can HR professionals maintain that and not just, you know, be called upon when a crisis hits?
Yeah. I think, I mean, having a seat at the table is great, but I often wonder whether sometimes that's lip service and, you know, a branding exercise in itself, because anyone can sit in a boardroom, anyone can sit at a table, but it's having the influence to be able to make change and make, you know, impact, you know, people practices to be better. So I think, as I talked about before, it's having an ability to lift your head up and see what's on the horizon, what's coming, you know, what's coming for the business, what's coming in the external landscape, what's changing that's going to limit the way that you recruit your best talent, or have, you know, how you manage talent in the pipeline, or how you attract great people to work for your organisation. So I think that, you know, having that kind of strategic view of the organisation, but also looking at the context that you're operating in is so important. And anyone that's been in any of my, you know, programs and coaching circles, I talk about context a lot. I'm like a broken record. What works for one organisation is not going to work for another. And having that seat at the table is great, but if you don't know the business well enough and you're not in there, you know, understanding, then you're probably not going to have the impact and the influence that you need.
Absolutely. And you make a really good point about that future focus. At the moment, often, you know, through my HR career, I have found that HR professionals are very much focused on the now, and the future focus might be in relation to workforce planning or something like that, but that's very HR focused as well, rather than that wider operational or, you know, business context as well, in terms of the future of our business itself. Brilliant lesson there. Thank you, Lorissa. Yeah. I want to learn a little bit more about your HR coaching circles. Can you tell me what that means, what that's about, please?
Yeah. So coaching circles, basically, they were born out of a program that I ran last year. So I ran a mentoring program, people partner mentoring program, and those sessions were quite content driven. So I would have, you know, a framework or a model or a tool that I'd sort of deliver, and then we'd talk about it as a group. But the group always had something else at the end that they wanted to talk about, another challenge or something else that they were trying to kind of figure out. And so I thought there's room here for people to bring their challenges along, learn in a social, you know, setting, social learning environment, but have access to a coach and a mentor at a, you know, at a much more affordable price than what one-on-one coaching and mentoring might be.
Yeah.
So coaching circles basically is a small group of people, so say 4 to 6 people coming together and learning, bringing their challenges and learning from each other, and you know, kind of talking through with accountability an action plan to work their way out of the challenge or the dilemma that they've got. So basically, yeah, that's basically what it is, but I love the things that come with that, and that's the networks that are, you know, that are formed, and the social learning that I've always learnt better from working with other people and learning from other people and listening to how they've done something and what worked and what didn't. So the magic that comes out of those sessions is quite fascinating.
Beautiful. So HR professionals will not only learn from you, but they'll learn from the other participants as well.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a HR professional considering a coaching circle, I'm going to think, I've got many issues to bring to the table. I have no doubt people are going to bring a lot to your coaching circles, Lorissa.
Yeah.
And from a HR perspective, a lot of the work that HR professionals do is bound by confidentiality, all of that. So can you tell me a little bit more about this kind of safe space that you create in the HR coaching circle?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I started doing as, you know, the kind of entry point into coaching circles was normalizing the challenges that people are facing. We are, as individuals, all facing different HR challenges, but when you bring it together and actually start talking about it, everyone's facing the same thing. So one of my first coaching circles, I had someone from Prague and someone from New Zealand, both HR practitioners in quite, you know, different organizations across the other side of the world. But when we started talking and kind of bringing together the challenges, both of them said, yeah, it's exactly what I'm facing. That's exactly the thing that I'm facing too. Now, the context, of course, is different,
yes,
but the challenge is similar. And so we kind of talked about how each of those people can address that challenge in their own context, what they need to take into consideration when they're solving the problems for the business and making sure they're solving the right problems for the business. You know, the business is bringing them a problem. Is that the problem, or do we need to go deeper and get to the root cause of the issue?
Ooh, so you really work through that and delve into the various options and the ways that the HR practitioner can actually address that with their stakeholders?
That's it, exactly. So I love a good model, I love a good framework, I love a good tool. And I learnt that, I guess, you know, through some tertiary study that I finished a couple of years ago, is that those things make a difference. You can present, you know, we can bring a model to life for 2 or 3 or 4 people that they can then go, right, I need to do this in my organisation, and the person next to them does something completely different that still gets a great outcome.
Completely. Lorissa, I love geeking out, and I know you do as well because I follow Lorissa on Instagram. So if you follow Lorissa on LinkedIn, very professional, which you completely are. And on Instagram, I love your sense of humor that comes through, and I love geeking out as well. So the kind of reports that you share and just stats and whatever else that you share on Instagram, I find really, really fascinating. Is there anything particular in terms of any reports or any stats that are really on your mind at the moment that you may want to talk to today?
Oh, good question. Unexpected question, but good one. I don't.
I was going to say, or do you have a favorite newsletter or something that HR professionals should really read, apart from your own, of course?
Yes, I'm feeling a bit slack on my own this year, I think, particularly in terms of, you know, there's a lot of information out there, and so we're being much more selective about what we're reading and what we're investing our time in.
Yeah.
You know, so there's some great, I mean, I follow a great Instagram account called OrgPsych, and they post a lot of, you know, a lot of really kind of funny and interesting stats and insights and memes and things like that. So I really, you know, if you're looking for a bit of a laugh around HR, and we always like to to do that, we always need that. So that's really good. I mean, I'm a strengths coach, and so some of the work that Gallup puts out and the stats and the reports, the insights that Gallup brings to life have been really fascinating. And I think particularly in terms of engagement, you know, engagement as we're moving to working from home more often and in different parts of the world, and experiencing the pandemic at different stages as well. That's been really interesting to watch. I tend to probably look towards a lot of sort of academic models, or models that the management consulting firms are using and things like that to bring to life for HR practitioners, because I think that they don't have access to that sort of stuff usually, and it's made such a difference to the way that I work. You know, so the McKinseys of the world, you know, I quite like their work and their models and methodologies. Use them quite often.
Absolutely. Gartner's been pretty interesting and insightful, and especially with all of the kind of statistics that they provide. And, you know, for HR professionals, when you have to create a business case, here are some stats to go with it as well.
Exactly. Burson as well, Josh Burson, he does some really interesting work in the HR space too. So if you're looking for, you know, as an HR practitioner, building your business case and boosting up some of that, then, yeah, delving into some of those. You know, HBR is a daily read for me. those types of things where there's academic evidence behind the stats that you're wanting to use. I think that always helps get a business case across the line.
Beautiful. Excellent. Lorissa, your HR circles sound really, really interesting. And I love the fact that you have them as a small group so that the group can really get into the nitty-gritty of whatever people are bringing to the table.
Yeah. And I think, I started out with sort of 4 people, went to 6 people. I often have between 4 and 6, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6, but I find that smaller, intimate environment, it allows people to be able to speak up. It's not, you're not going into an environment where there's really senior HR people, and if you're a junior, you're going to feel as though you don't have the right or the confidence to step up and ask a question or provide an insight. So I think in terms of that, it's creating the safe space. People aren't going to learn if they're not feeling safe, and so that's something that I really want to encourage in the circles.
Completely. What kind of things are keeping you busy at the moment otherwise, Lorissa?
Yeah, so coaching circles. I'm doing a fair bit of work around a tool that I use called the Emotional Culture Deck, which is an interesting time to be using a culture deck. So it's basically a set of cards with emotions, what we call desired and undesired emotions, or welcome and unwelcome emotions. And we look at how we can use those in a workplace to enable people to feel much more safe and welcome and belong in their workplace. So what people want to feel in the workplace and what they need to feel for success versus the things that they don't want to feel. And as an individual, looking at those and saying, well, I want to feel more empowered. What's behind that? Why? When was the last time I felt empowered? What can I do in my own work to feel more empowered, or how can I, talk to my manager about what empowers me? So that's a really great tool to use. And it's also a great leadership tool too, because you can look at it from a leadership perspective and say, how do I want my people to feel? So it's not just about yourself, it's about what environment you're setting up for your people. So I've been doing a fair bit of work around sort of culture and not even, sometimes we just call it a conversation about how we want to feel in the workplace, or what's going to enable us to succeed in this very trying time. What do we want to feel at the end of 3 months, and what do we need to put in place to do that? So that's been quite interesting work. Some strengths workshops as well. I think it's a really good opportunity for organisations to revisit not only how people are working individually, but as a team, what they're bringing to the team and how they're operating. And then some leadership coaching as well. So leadership coaching for me goes across both people partners, what I call people partners, so HR, and then those that are in a general leadership role as well. I think the pandemic has caused people to really rethink their leadership style and have to adjust their leadership style. And so working with them to identify that, and, working with a sort of leadership canvas to identify what's important to them and how they want people, to feel in the workplace, and how they want people to respond and react in the workplace.
Beautiful. Sounds like you've got many things happening at the moment.
Yeah.
I have one final question for you, Lorissa.
Oh, yep.
One way that you would change the workplace?
Yeah, look, that's a really interesting question, because there's so many little things that you can do that make such big impact. But if I was to round it up, I'd be creating more psychologically safe workplaces.
How?
Yeah, so I think workplaces that allow more empathy, kindness, compassion, self-awareness, the ability to give and receive feedback with grace and good intention. So I think having those things in a workplace enables people to feel that safety, that belonging. It enables them, better collaboration, better productivity, better relationships, better communities within both internally and externally in the organisation. And so I think, those things are really important. It's a long process. It's one that you have to commit to. But I think if we can start to bring more self-awareness to psychologically safe environments, we'd have much more, open workplaces.
And we're really seeing the need for that, given the pandemic and everything that's happening right now, and more of a need going forward as well.
Absolutely. And I think, even the employee experience has changed since we've all been sort of working from home. And so we need to account for that. What are people feeling, when they're not having the connection that they once had?
Yeah, and I'd love to look at the whole employee experience, given that the way of work has completely changed now as well. That would be beautiful to look at. Yeah. Lorissa, thank you so much. I am looking forward to eating a croissant with you shortly. if people want to get in touch with you, I'm going to share all of your details in the show notes. Is there anything else you would like to say before we eat our croissants?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of getting in touch with me, I do like a human-centered approach. So if you're wanting to connect, then write me a small message to say, you know, that you've seen me on the YouTube channel, on Prina's YouTube channel, and you know, let's have a conversation. So I like to have proper connection with my people. Otherwise, we're just a photo on someone's screen. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a really nice chat and very energizing, and I look forward to my almond croissant as well.
Same here. I really enjoyed our chat, Lorissa. It's really good to get to know you more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.